folks. In this episode, I continue my conversation with Witlee Ethan, and we discuss more of her trials and tribulations. I titled this episode Exodus because it reminded me of how even after escaping a tyrant, Moses and his followers still had to endure misery in the desert. As you'll see, there's many things that people go through that we think should end in a happy fairy tale because that's what we see depicted in Hollywood and all over Disney and all these stories, that there's always a happy ending. And unfortunately, fiction tends to be a little bit nicer than nonfiction. We see that life tends to be a little more cruel than we would appreciate, definitely. But with God on your side, there's no worry in it at all. And I know faithfully that with him, there's nothing I can't accomplish. And as well, that with being a Christian, it doesn't mean that my life will all of a sudden become easier. It actually becomes more difficult until you completely turn yourself over. So I hope you can appreciate and hear what an amazing person these trials and tribulations have made Witlee Ethan into, and see how even in the darkest times, there's still light. All you have to do is open your eyes. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy this episode of The Sound of Sosa.
So February of last year, when I won my case against my rapist, that is when he filed a lawsuit against me for defamation, my ex-fiance, same month, for $550,000. Now, this is what's interesting. So 5 months after we were supposed to get married, he married somebody else. Her best friend's husband is the attorney. What's interesting is his now second wife is also suing her ex for defamation. A $250,000 lawsuit. So they're looking to get a lot of money from the people that they've treated, abused, taken advantage of, whatever you want to call it. Well, I'm not in Florida. There was he, because he was in Texas. So the attorney added his own wife so that he could claim that Florida had jurisdiction. I had a hearing in August of last year in which I brought this up to the judge. The only person that's a Florida resident, which, by the way, he also added his first ex-wife. He has his first ex-wife, is now soon-to-be new wife's best friend, whose husband is the attorney. But, by the way, same judge, same attorney for the case with his now new wife's ex, where she's suing him. I said to the judge, this doesn't fall within Florida jurisdiction. And the attorney is using his wife to claim that he has Florida jurisdiction, though I've never met nor ever spoken with or talked with her. He said, I'm going to allow it. I said, I didn't do anything wrong. And he said, well, we'll see about that. I had a hearing in September of last year. Now, meanwhile, I'm going through all of this. And one of the things that they ask in their hearing is they want all the information on my rapist because they want to use him as a witness against me at trial. Because when I was served, trial in Florida was already set. It's like I'm already by Florida standard. It's not innocent until proven guilty. It is you are automatically guilty. It is against the whole foundation of our judicial system. Well, as a crime victim, because of what happened with my rapist, I have certain rights, which means certain protections. My phone number, email address are not allowed to be made public. His attorney and the judge said, we don't believe you're a victim. I even submitted the police report. They didn't believe I was a victim. So my crime victims' rights, my rights under Marcy's law, my constitutional rights, were all being violated. All my information was being made public. And so I countersued, not for money, but to get them to back off. And in the state of Florida, of like 20 to 30 days to respond to something. If you don't, it's an automatic default win. If there's any type of monetary thing, the other side gets it. They were in default, never responded to the counterclaim, which did nothing. Clerk of court denied that they were in default, wouldn't put that they were in default. So I asked for the judge to be recused, which is, I've been informed you don't do that because judges don't like that. He denied it and said he wasn't going to be removing himself from my court case. There was bias that was being shown, and the judge at this point in September said, you'll be in Florida for 2 weeks. Trial. I'm like, this is unbelievable. So then another thing that they asked for in interrogatories and admissions and just in production, they wanted everything. They wanted my physical phone. They wanted my computer. They wanted my bank records. They wanted my car records. They wanted my tax records. They wanted any case I've ever been involved in. They wanted all of it. They wanted everything. They wanted me to hand over my phone and leave it in Florida. My phone that is used to protect myself, that is used for me to call 911 if I need help. I'm a certified life coach and relationship coach, so I have client files. They wanted access to everything, wanted to know everybody in my life. There was one attorney, an angel, that helped me with writing things. Now, I am struggling with faith right now. And the fact that this was a man who claimed to love me, trying to destroy me at every attempt. And worse, we now have Christians because he's tied to so many people. The pro-life movement, ties to churches. I mean, so many churches were involved. Gateway Church out in Texas. We're talking about Calvary Orlando, which is where his so-called pastor is, who's also the ghostwriter for Benny Hinn. We're talking about the Crossing Church in Tampa. We're talking about so many churches that are involved in this. And I'm just like, God, like, I don't get this. Like, why is this happening? Like, I literally went from winning one court case to now I'm smack dead in the middle of another court case and just feeling exhausted. And like, I can't write any more missions. I don't have it in me. I didn't really have the fight in me. I didn't know how to fight this anymore. It was depleted. Meanwhile, he is posting things on social media about me. People being like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you went through that. Like, this person is evil. This person's of the devil. And I'm like, unbelievable. And then I get from his attorney saying, listen, he was recently diagnosed with autism. I think you should be able to look at some of his abuse as being an excuse of his condition, and it really was an abuse. And I was like, no condition is an excuse for abuse. I called autism like organizations, and they're like, this is so bad. Because what this could set a precedent of, anybody could get off scot-free by saying, I have a condition, didn't mean to kill them, didn't mean to abuse them, it's not my fault, it was the condition. Not only that, but then it would send a message that everybody with autism is violent. Everybody in autism is an abuser. That's not true. And so I was like, this can't happen. Like, this is not okay.
And if he's a functioning autistic, we've seen.
Well, here's the thing: his son's autistic. I diagnosed him. I said, "I think you have autism." His 50s at this point, and he's like, "No, I don't." The record, it talks about how it was diagnosed, and what's crazy to me is son has it. How did you not know you had it?
Yeah.
And so, like, here's this thing that's like, okay, we're going to use this as an example. So in September, I had to file things. I didn't hold back on what I filed. It was very hard to file things. I just didn't have the motivation. I pushed through. Knowing again, I'm my only advocate, and all of the organizations in Florida won't help me because one, I'm out of state, and second, civil case. They don't help in civil cases. They help victims in criminal cases, and in this case, I'm not considered the victim. I'm considered the defendant. And I called the Spring of Tampa Bay in regards to this being domestic abuse, and they're like, "Who else is involved?" And I told them the names, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like we can't help you because the church, the Crossing, had all these people, the attorney, his wife, my ex's new wife, and him all go to. Recently had given it a $20,000 plus check donation to the Spring of Tampa Bay."
Wow.
They were being bought. I called the Tampa Bay mayor. They wouldn't do anything. I called the justice of the courts. They would hear what I had to say, but they wouldn't do anything. Everybody was doing nothing. They were just sitting on this information. Nobody would do anything. So really, like, God, where are you? And I mean, like, in September, I will say, of last year, I really felt like the only way I was going to make it through was if I had faith community. And at this point, because I had past church hurts, I really wasn't in a faith community. And I took a closet, took it apart, and created a prayer room. And I went to war in that room. I was on my hands and knees praying. And one of the things I was praying for is, God, change their hearts and help me to win favor, help this case to be dismissed. And got an attorney. All of a sudden became buddies with my ex's attorney, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, you just need to sign the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement was that my ex wanted to control my podcast, to control anything, because as a relationship expert, I've talked about my own experiences. He wanted me to go to everybody's podcast I'd ever been on where I talked about my experience with him and have them delete it. Legally, I don't own the rights to those. What the settlement agreement was going to do was it was going to give him power and control over my voice. I had just gotten back after winning the other case, and it would set me up for future lawsuits if I said something he didn't agree with. And I'm being told, you don't want to go to court and trial and represent yourself per se. You're not going to win. This is your best choice. And I'm like, no. There's got to be another way. God can't be okay with me losing my voice and all of my rights being violated. I've got to believe there's another way. This isn't okay. I asked for extra time. His attorney said, nope, you're not getting it, which I found out that his attorney, the wife of the attorney, her stepdad had just died, was a well-known attorney in Florida. And I had reported him to the Florida State Bar, but of course there's bias there and they did nothing, as per usual. So what ended up happening was this godsend of an angel female attorney, I sent things, wrote things, held the admissions interrogatories, didn't hand over anything, saying if you want it, you're going to have to get a subpoena. And but here's all my answers. And I was thorough and detailed. And this is so important when you're representing yourself and you're advocating for yourself. You have to be as organized, like as much as you can, because it will save you. So I went to bat. I went in for myself, advocated for myself, and my answers included information that was made public in the filings, because the filings were made public. But I will say they eventually came around and they redacted heavily, made even some of them public, had my personal information in them, protect me in accordance with my rights. And so I admitted everything, because when I had asked for extra time, the attorney said, who by the way claims to be a Christian attorney and have a Christian law firm, if you don't submit this, I'm going to file that you're in default and in contempt of court. And to be in contempt of court in Florida is 30 days in jail. So I literally had a few days to put all of this together, worked on it nonstop that weekend, and that Monday when it was due, filed everything. 3 separate things I had to file. And then I sat on it. They never responded. This was March of this year. And I really felt like there's a few things that kept coming up that I kept seeing, like a lot that I kept seeing. And some of those things that kept coming up was, I will fight for you. You need only be still. I kept seeing that over and over and over again. Another thing that I kept seeing was memes and quotes saying, like, be ready when things start moving in your favor, things will happen fast. And then I kept looking at Psalm 91, especially the part where it says, you're my refuge, and the Lord says, I will rescue him, I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life, I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Another verse that kept coming up was Psalms 34. In Psalms 34, where it says, I will always thank the Lord. I will never stop praising him. I will praise him for what he has done. May all who are oppressed listen and be glad. Proclaim the Lord's greatness. Let us praise his name together. And I'm like, okay, are you going to turn the tide? Like, because we are way past the 11th hour, and I would have people pray. I'm like, we're not in the 11th hour. We're in the 11th hour. Like, we are so far beyond where he needs to step in. I'm scared he's not going to step in, because it's like Christians against Christians. There's these people that are claiming to be Christians with all these ties to faith influencers, pastors, churches that are, I mean, even like pro-life leaders like from Embrace Grace that have ties to Gateway, which is so interesting, because then Robert Morris, the pastor of Gateway, was recently exposed that he actually abused a 12-year-old, and yet the Embrace Grace Pregnancy Center is funneled through Gateway. Robert Morris has had connections with all of those women that have come through needing help. And I knew he wasn't someone to be trusted with, because my ex had ties to him, and the founder of Embrace Grace did, who, the founder of Embrace Grace, slandered and defamed me along, like, my ex defamed me to her, and she defamed. And I actually reached out to her and said, this is not okay. You say you're for women, and what you just did, I blew your witness. And she's like, I'm so sorry. And I said, just so you know, I could sue you for this, for what you've done, because you continue to cross the line. But it was like a fake, false apology. She really wasn't apologetic. And I mean, it just, people that are being raised up and admired for their leadership are actually people causing a lot of great harm. And that's what happened in the situation. It was magnified. So many Christian people involved that it was sickening. And here we are, this case is going on, and it's March of this year, and I feel like can't fight, which was so strange. I'm like, I don't feel any fight in me. There must be a reason, God. I don't feel the need to fight. And I felt I needed to be still. Didn't know why, didn't know what was going on. And I would regularly check the case filings to see if anything new had happened. I happened to check them in June. This is March, now it's June, haven't heard anything, nothing. And it says I have a hearing in 2 days in Florida, where I actually have to physically be in Florida. Yeah. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, they are supposed to check that with me because I'm pro se, so it has to first, can I even be in Florida? Like, what about work? So I immediately respond. It's like 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, what's going on? I respond to the judge's chamber, to his attorney, and to the Chief Justice of court. And I'm like, this isn't okay. Like, you have to check. And so his attorney comes back. His attorney's emails at this point had been very argumentative, very like, you're in the wrong, you're the bad person, like, you're going down. He changed his tone. And he's like, listen, so like, how about Friday? Because at this point I'm due Florida on Thursday. And I'm like, no, that's not enough time there. And what the hearing is for is to have my case dismissed, my counterclaim. He's never responded to that he's in default for, he wants it dismissed. Which would be really bad if their case is still outstanding against me and I have nothing against them. I would lose a lot of leverage. Yeah. And he ended it with saying, my client would like to dismiss the case. And I thought, that's new. What does that mean? He said, how about I write a joint stipulation for dismissal? You review it. Again, this angel of an attorney went to her and I'm like, what do I do? She's like, this is great, but don't let them write it. You need to write it because you'll have control over what's said. So I didn't respond to him. I just said, I am not going to be able to meet until July 8th if we have a meeting. It will be via Zoom. I'm not coming to Florida. Yeah. And here you go. The joint stipulation for dismissal, here you go. And here's also the additional thing that the judge has to sign dismissing this case. And this will be dismissed with prejudice, which means it can't be brought back up again. He said, you sign it, then I will sign it. And he said, okay. He said, after you sign it, send it to me and I'll submit it. This was Wednesday. It was submitted on Friday. The case was dismissed. It was closed. Now, I'm like, wait a second. She hasn't signed off on it. And like, you know, one of the things I didn't want was I didn't want to sign anything with my ex. I felt like this was a chaotic mess, and that I felt like we were getting a divorce. I didn't want to sign anything with him. Luckily, he didn't have to sign this because it wasn't a settlement agreement. Only the attorney had to sign on behalf of him. And I listed, the attorney was also signing on behalf of him. And at one point, I noticed in our emails, I said, why isn't your wife included on this email anymore? And he's like, well, he doesn't have anything against you anymore. I said, but she's still listed on the lawsuit. So if you won, she would still get part of the $550,000. And then he said, I could have filed this in Texas. I didn't have to file it in Florida. And I said, I am well aware you've been an attorney in Texas. You're not active, so no, you couldn't have filed it in Texas. It's like he kept trying to put things past me as if like I have power and authority, and I'm like, not happening. And then for the first time, I was able to speak up on everything, and I said, let me tell you what you all have put me through. You can claim to be Christians, but that is not at all what you are. You have blown your witness. There's nothing that God is happy about this. What you did, what he did, what the Crossing Church did, what I listed everybody. I said, God defends his daughters, and God will deal with you in his timing. And he didn't submit the thing to the judge. I said, when are you going to do this? And he's like, well, I'm on vacation. I'll submit it in a few days. I'm like, no, I'll submit it. And he said, okay, we'll put that it's unopposed. And I'm like, fine. I sat on it for a week. I expected that, given that he didn't like me after I tried to have him removed. And then at 10:32 at night on June 28th, said order signed. And I thought July 4th will be a lot different this year because everybody else a lot of times takes for granted their rights because they think that they have them. My rights have been violated. My right, freedom of speech, my constitutional rights, my crime victims' rights. I was at jeopardy of losing. And I didn't have to sign away anything. Everything mine protected. There's never any talk about settlement. And on July 1st, I was like, it's still saying we still have a trial date on August 13th of this year. July 1st, it came through. The trial had been canceled. I was able to celebrate July 4th with this huge weight lifted. When I got the news that I won my case, now my second case in 16 months per set, I had won. And was completely in the details. And you know, at one point I asked God, what was the point of this? Now that it's over, what good came from this? And he said, you have a prayer closet. And you have a faith community that you didn't have. I'm like, okay. Oh yeah, that makes sense. But I will say my faith was tested, and I was brought to my knees many times. I will say that it's usually those times when I was brought to my knees that I knew I was going to grow the most and that I was going to come out closer to God. Because instead of pushing him away, I wrestled with him. I didn't push him away, but I wrestled. I mean, fist up in the air, screaming, yelling, what are you doing? Are you sleeping on the job? Did you forget my number? What's going on? But, you know, like the scripture said, I was always able to praise him and honor him, and to then be able to, I mean, and I will say this, people have been praying for me so much over the last 4 years that it finally got to a point where they would say to me, you still need prayer? Like, God hasn't done something yet? And I'm like, yeah, I still need prayer. Like, again? It's like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, as a Christians, we're supposed to be praying.
Always.
Or I would get, yes, always, pray without ceasing. Or I would get, you know, have you looked into your own life? I think the reason this is still happening is you have sin that you haven't dealt with. And I'm like, no. No, that's not it. But believe me, I'm praying. I'm on the floor on my knees in my prayer closet praying. I couldn't be praying more. Like, I'm praying nonstop. And it was just crazy people's perspective on why people were suffering, because you hear so many times people on social media saying, you know, like, just trust God and all the good things will happen. And like, you know, if you're struggling, you're clearly not trusting God. And it's like, that's not what scripture says. It says in this world you will have trouble. Like, you're going to have trouble. It doesn't matter if you're struggling or not struggling. It doesn't matter if you're praying or not praying. You are going to have trouble. That is a promise. Shaming people when they are going through hell and making it seem like they did something wrong. You're no better than the person that did them wrong. And so I really had to remove myself from a lot of groups of people that weren't serving me, that weren't helping me. And just realizing that in a lot of ways I could look at this and say that they won in some ways. I spent money I shouldn't have had to spend. I was stressed to the max. My faith was shaken. And, you know, in the midst of this, at the end of last year, I'm now getting retested for cancer, and I'm thinking, about to begin a trial. I don't need dealing with cancer, which, by the way, by the grace of God, the doctor said your cancer.
There we
in
go.
November of last year.
There we go.
So he said, I'll see you in 5 years. Like, you're good. I don't need to see you anytime soon. I'm like, oh, thank God. Last thing I need is that on top of everything else. I think, you know, as I look back on it, it's just a really great testimony of how we will still face trials. Literal trial. I mean, literal spirited trial. I don't know why, can't answer why this worked out the way it did for me, because I know as a victim advocate for legislative reform, there's so many victims that they don't have this outcome. And for those that have gone through that, I don't know why I did. And I'm so sorry for you that haven't. It's not fair. Because you can have all the faith in the world and things still happen. I mean, look at Job. He had all the faith in the world and it didn't save his family. And, you know, a lot of times people will then say, well, it was restored. He got a new family. It's like, he still lost his family. Yes, he was restored. One family doesn't replace another family, just like a child doesn't replace another child. A new spouse doesn't replace the other spouse. Like, your house burns down, a new house won't replace that house in his memories. Like, it's okay to sit in that and acknowledge that and accept that. When we have this positive mentality of, oh, it's all good, and like God will restore and redeem, and lose sight of what we're still lost. And again, I don't know why things worked out, but what I can say is my faith is stronger. I've seen God's hand in ways I didn't before. Last year, because of me going through my coaching courses, when I became a certified life and relationship coach, I started grieving the loss of my child. Grief has been a very difficult journey. Shared it online, and it's interesting to see all these moms say, oh, I miscarried twins, I miscarried this, and then to hear moms say, I have no doubt that our kids are playing in heaven, is so comforting to me as a mom, because I am someone's mom. My child resides in heaven, and I think what I've learned in my grief is that people still don't, still something hard for people to talk about. I know that there's, you could hear a couple miscarried and you'll be like, oh my gosh, how do we support them? You hear a single woman miscarried and it's like, oh my God, you committed a sin. You had sex outside of marriage. Oh boy. Or I didn't have sex outside of marriage, I was raped. Why would you want a baby out of rape? Like, isn't it a blessing the baby didn't live? The baby died, and it's like, baby's not defined by what he did.
Yeah.
Baby's not defined by the rape or the trauma, and the baby is still a part of me.
Yeah.
And if we're saying that everybody is a precious life and gift of God, and so is my baby. I will say that someone had said to me, is it possible for us to, it can be hard to understand the miscarriage and loss, but is it possible that the baby had lived? The baby had been caught in a custody battle with your rapist, and you would have been completely helpless to protect that baby. God knew that. And baby now being safe, never knowing the evilness of this world, only ever know God's goodness and grace is in the safe arms of Jesus. And my empty arms and my heart long to hold and kiss and mother my baby. It is peaceful and comforting in knowing my baby is safe. I won't have to ever deal with the things I've dealt with or experience those things, that I would never have to protect my baby from that. But there's still a loss. And it's kind of like where you can have multiple emotions existing. I'm at peace that my baby's safe. I also grieve the fact that my baby's not here. Mother's Day is hard. Holidays are hard. I have friends that have babies and kids, and it's great to hear about them. There is a part of me that's like, what would my 4-year-old be doing this year? What would they be interested in? What would I be picking out for Christmas? That's hard. And I got robbed of one day sharing with my husband that I'm pregnant for the first time because it happened to my rapist. It resulted in a miscarriage. Something I should have never have gone through. So the way I look at it is, in this situation, there's 2 victims. I survived. And that's hard. That heaviness is hard. And I think that's really important, is when there's trauma isn't the person. You have to understand that there are aspects of people's story that's still heavy and hard to accept. Though I accept what's happened, and I don't let it define me, it's still very much a part of my life. And this bill wouldn't exist if I hadn't gone through what I've gone through. Now, with this court case behind me, I'm able to fully focus on my career as a coach, anything else I want to do, and making a difference on this bill that's going to help so many. And I feel like it's not just my legacy and some semblance of justice for me, because if he does it again, this bill would apply to him. It's also a legacy of my unborn child, of this precious baby that will be waiting for me when I go to heaven. And, I think it's just, how do we look at things? We all have a story. Ultimately, our story is to be used for God's glory. I mean, we weren't put on this earth for ourselves. We were put on this earth to kingdom build and to accomplish things God wants us to accomplish. But not everybody does that. Sometimes they get so caught up in their story that they just want to run from it, not acknowledge it, and they don't allow God to use it. And I'll say my life verse has been Genesis 50:20, what Satan intended to harm you with, God intended for your good, the saving of many lives. And I hope and pray that when I stand before God, he'll say, like, well done, good and faithful servant, and that he'll tell me I did just that. That my story made a difference. That my story, which is ultimately his story, and that it was used to help so many, even people I may not even know it helped. And even just by anyone listening to this, my hope and prayer, more so than anything else, is that you don't focus on what happened. You focus on what God did when I experienced what I experienced. And that you focus on the faith I have that came from that refining fire. A refining fire I didn't want to deal with, that I didn't want to go through. Honestly, if I could go back, I would probably say, okay, I'm not taking this road. I'm going to take a detour, and I'm not going to go through this. But then at the same time, seeing all the good that's come from what I've overcome, I would really selfish to remove this, knowing it's made such a difference and the impact it can still make and will make. My story isn't an easy story, and we all kind of have stories like that. But again, trauma, I'm not the rape. Too often, Nico, I find Christians identify. I mean, even in my like meeting Christians and lately, the thing of, oh, that happens. Or they'll be like, so are you a mom? And I'm like, not on this side of heaven. Crickets. And I'm mistreated based on my story. Here's the thing, to mistreat someone because of their story, to reject them, dismiss them, cruel to them, you're actually doing that to God. And God showed up. I mean, he didn't just show up, he showed off. That's why I hope people look at, when you're hearing the timeline of events, which this is the first time I've actually gone through a complete timeline like this over the last 4 years. When you hear the timeline, I hope people see it like you're saying it, Nico, like, oh my gosh, that's inspiring, and oh my gosh, like, look at what you came through. Not being focused on, like, this is beauty from ashes, but don't focus on the ashes. Focus on the beauty that came from the ashes. That's the powerful part. That's where the testimony and the message is. What did I do with those ashes? I didn't fall apart. I didn't let it change me. I still believe in God's goodness and decency of mankind, and I believe that there's good cops out there, and I believe that there's good men out there. I believe that love exists. Based on what I've been through, you wouldn't think that that would be true, but I believe that because I believe in God. And my faith is everything. And if anything, I hope this gives you hope that, yes, bad things happen, but God's the God who restores and heals and redeems. And my story is nothing but that. I mean, everything I've overcome, suicide attempts, spine injury, I mean, cancer, everything, sexual assault, domestic violence, everything. A walking miracle. And I know that. And if people can't see that and are going to judge me from something, we shouldn't judge our people based on the choices they make. But if you're going to judge me based on choices other people made that I then suffered the consequences of their actions and choices, man, that says something about you and your heart, your character. It doesn't say anything about me.
No.
It's everything about you. And you need to work that out with God, because that's not adopting a Christ mindset. And, you know, if anyone has a story, they don't have someone to share it with, I'll be that person to listen. I can give Nico my email address and you can reach out. For all the victims and survivors of sexual assault, I want you to know, when I am fighting for this bill, thinking of every single one of you that are victims and survivors, those that ended their lives because they didn't deal with it, those that were murdered, those that are still fighting, that barely feel like they're surviving, that they feel like a victim. And this is really important. Stop throwing around victimhood with victims.
Say that one more time.
Stop throwing around the terminology victimhood or victim mentality with victims. And the reason is because we are not in a position to tell a victim whether they're a victim or survivor.
Yeah, no, that's their choice.
And they don't feel like they've survived. And I will say I am both. When I write a victim statement, they don't ask for a survivor statement. It's a victim statement. That's the proper terminology. When I wrote my bill, I'm not writing, it's a victim and survivor bill. Like, it would be a survivor act, but I'm writing as a victim. I am both. Not my identity. It's just happened to me. I survived it, but I was a rapist victim. But I have a victim mentality, not living in victimhood. And that's the other thing. Victims or survivors will share the story, and people automatically are like, you haven't healed. You're struggling. You're operating with a victim mentality just for telling their story. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Telling our story this power empowers us and takes back our power from those that took it and tried to destroy us. It's also healing. I've been through hell and back, and we
That's
are
an
still
understatement.
standing. It's still standing. I mean, there's been times where I've had to crawl. I couldn't walk. I had to crawl on what felt like broken glass to get to the other side. And yeah, I mean, I felt the heaviness of what happened to me when I was his victim, and when I was a victim of other people's choices. I am a survivor. I am both, and I'm not ashamed to say that, and nobody else should be either, because we shouldn't be shaming people when they use certain terminology. It doesn't help. It hurts. It causes harm, and it's not helping them to heal. And yes, I'm going to keep telling my story, not because I'm not a Christian or it's lacking being Christ-like. Absolutely not. I will be speaking out and exposing injustices and harm and evilness so that people know, are armed with the information to protect themselves. Because if people in our society are going to pretend to be people that are good and that are going to use their positions of power to prey on people and take advantage of them, then you better believe I'm going to be speaking out. And here's the thing. I've gone through a lot. I've overcome a lot. I've fought like hell. I'm just getting started. This isn't the ending. It's the beginning. My bill is, whatever happens with the bill, it's a milestone. I just wrote it in April last year, and we've already accomplished so much. God's got it. Whatever's happening with it, I've come a long way. And just the fact that people know about it, it's on people's radar. And to my rapist, your DNA's in the system, so just so you know.
Yeah.
You people will hold you accountable if you do this again.
Yes. Oh, that is, your story has so many aspects to it. It's, like I said, I don't look into anybody. What you sent me is all I had on you. I like to go in blind because I feel like it makes for more candid conversation, and then as well too, it allows me to truly feel your side of it without any bias or prejudgments or any knowledge of even what you're even telling me. And it, every time I do it, I am scared. I get nervous because I'm like, oh, what if there's something I'm gonna miss or something I bring up that I shouldn't? And so I usually try to mitigate that with like questions in the beginning. But every time afterwards, or every time like I'm just like, I'm so glad I did not look up anything, because this is too strong of a story for me to even try and interpret myself. And you say people, oh, you're wrong for sharing your story. I say you really need to reevaluate yourself if you think someone's wrong for sharing their story, because everybody has one, and that story, like you said, you hope it does. I guarantee you telling your story will help somebody. I can guarantee it. And if it hasn't already, I mean, it probably already has. And it's wrong for anyone to tell you that you shouldn't share your story, because like I said before, we all have God in us. We treat each other as if they are God. And so our story, like you said, is God's story. And so with that, it's you moved mountains. You moved mountains. Every time you came up to something, your faith may have wavered in that time, but he was still there. He couldn't. The one thing that really stinks about it too with God is we know he can't control free will. And so it's like he may have been opening those doors for those people to make the right decision, because God even does say, pray for our enemies so that they may turn from their wickedness. And so, because they're the hearts that need it the most. And so he probably was even on the other side, when you felt like he wasn't near you. He may not have been near you at that point because he was trying to open the doors for them to make the right decision. But unfortunately, the devil was too strong with them. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say the devil was too strong with them. They were too strong into the devil to realize they needed to turn back to him, because And like I'm not trying to justify anything of what happened to you. That's not at what I'm getting at all. I, I always say, if someone does me wrong, let justice handle it. I will never seek revenge because God's judgment is worse than anything I could ever do to them. And so I hope they repent, and I hope that they do have a coming to Jesus moment, but I also do hope that God judges them the way they deserve to be judged, and I hope he does the same for me, for things I've done. And I have regrets for my sin, and I have been baptized, and I have asked for forgiveness, and I continue to ask for forgiveness because I always need it. And I will never be to the side of what obviously to the opposite side of what happened to you. Yeah, no. And so, but I still, I mean, like God says, if we turn to him, we will be cleansed. And so I'm thankful for never ever being so far away from him that I could ever have done something like that, because I couldn't live with myself. I really couldn't. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And so, on the other side of that, going through what you went through, I can't even be sure that I would have persevered the way you did. You had such a strong will to keep going, and you kept on getting through these unfortunate events just to be met with another. Um, that is the story of God's chosen people, of the Jewish people. They escape, they escape a tyrant only to be met with merciless treatment, almost. They're met with damnation. Really, they're sent off to a desert. There's nothing, but there's sustainability when you turn back to God, and you kept turning back to him. So it's exactly what you should have done. And you're literally footing the cross. You're doing whether you understood it before I said it in that way. You've walked that walk, and you're in that walk, and it will get better. Whether it's I can't tell the future, but whether it's in this fleshy body or not, your existence will get better. And whether it's with God or if sometimes I think people are put here to have a battle for him because of all the good that you will bring. And so don't ever give up hope. Obviously, I don't think you will. I don't think there's a way for you to, and it is inspiring because I like hearing about it, and I love hearing how God can work so greatly in people's lives, because that's exactly what we need to do. We need to be professing that. And so even to come back to how people criticized you're doing exactly what God says. Profess the greatness of my works in your life. And that's exactly what you're doing. The one side is the horrible side, yes, but the professing side is how he stayed with you and had you persevere when even when going through the story back in my head right now, every door was put in front of you, and he just said, hold on, I got this. There you go. And it seemed like that door would have stayed locked forever if I was in your shoes. I mean, even sitting listening to the story, I'm like, when is the door gonna get open for you? When is it? And it's like I was so anxious, like, oh, please don't let there be another bad thing that happens. And and I love seeing you smile too, because it just lets me know that you are a strong person, and there still can be happiness after horrible things happen, and I think people need that. you know um there's so much.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And we talked about suicide attempts, and if that had been successful, like, all this good. I mean, there's a lot of bad that happened and followed after that, but all the good that came from it wouldn't have come from it. And yeah, God could easily have moved mountains and changed things. I mean, if I hadn't been held hostage, and if I hadn't been raped, it'd be a bill. Be a need for a bill. I wouldn't have known at all what was happening with the Me Too that she said he sued. I learned that trying to look up things to better advocate for myself in my case. There's so much within our judicial system I would not have been made aware of. There's so much within our society I would not, like, my eyes wouldn't have been open to. And God gave me a voice from a very young age. And I've known he's wanted me to use it. And so anytime, it's not always comfortable speaking up, and I really don't like doing it, but there's been times I'm like, oh, think back to when I was a little girl and I spoke up, and the impact of my voice, and knowing that I need to speak up because maybe he's having me do this because he knows others won't. And I mean, here we are. We have this bill, and so I mean that's really important, of being able to see that, and that life had ended when I was a teen. These bad things wouldn't have happened, but they would have happened to somebody else. And the change that's coming with them because I persevered and I didn't give up and didn't stay silent. That is not just making a difference on this side of heaven, but also for God's kingdom. There was an incident when I was 5, and I had to protect my siblings from a babysitter boyfriend. And I felt God say, you're going to have to make him leave. If you don't, you're going to have to threaten him, that you're going to call the police and go across the street and get one of the neighbors with their guns. Okay, I'm 5. It's 9 o'clock at night. Terrified of the dark, to be out going across the street with, no lights on in the street. And I felt like God was preparing me, like, you're going to have to use your voice. And of course, as I'm approaching where he is, I'm thinking, who's going to listen to me? I'm 5. Who's not going to leave? I made it very clear if he stayed, my siblings and I would be hurt. So I went into that room and I said, you need to leave. If you don't leave, I'm going to call 911 and I'm going to call my grandma. I'm going to go across the street and I'm going to go get our neighbor with their guns. He had the babysitter up against the wall. He pushed off of that wall and just stared down, and I was bracing physically. I thought I was going to get hit across the face. He grabbed his motorcycle helmet and walked past me to the front door. She said, you don't have to leave. Just a kid. And I said, actually, he does, because since my parents aren't here, I'm in charge of the house. He does have to leave. He's 5. And he left, and I never saw him again. And I think back to that moment. That was it was actually the second time. I had heard God another time when I was 4. That was like the second time I heard God, him telling me what to do, because he even said, even if he doesn't leave, you have to leave your siblings behind and go get help. Even if you hear them screaming, you need to go get help and not come back until you do. So I was mentally prepared for that. And so I think about that in situations like this, when I'm going up against huge giants. I mean, we're talking the police, the government, different people against Goliath. And I think back to that 5-year-old little girl, and I'm like, if she can do it, do it. And that's what's helped me, because I know that he gave me that voice at such a young age. And if my voice made a difference and made him leave, voice can make a difference now, and it has. And so I think that's so important. I also want to say, and I think this is also really important, is the men out there. Everybody has baggage. Even some men have been victims of abuse, sexual abuse. We are not defined by our purity. That doesn't define our worth. We are not defined by what other men do to us. We judge us based on what other men have done to us. Makes you no better than those men. And the right guy comes in, who's going to be someone who won't be scared of our wounds or scars or our brokenness. Be a healing balm, can help us to bloom and heal and grow. And everybody has baggage. And I saw this as a meme, and it said, you either trip over each other's baggage or you help each other unpack it. And it can help you grow and like really like even grow in intimacy, like, and help you to connect better. So I think that's really important. I've had so many guys, even over the last 4 years, that have judged me for being a victim of domestic and sexual violence, that have judged me for having court cases, that people have said, oh gosh, this court case goes on, like no one will ever marry you because they don't want to have the baggage. They want to just, I've been told my trauma is an issue. My trauma is a deal breaker. First of all, don't identify me by trauma. I'm not the trauma. It happened to me. It's not me. I'm not the rape. It happened to me. It's not me. You know, like I was sued. Not me. Somebody else sued me. Like those aren't me. And those aren't other women. And so when we are basically putting people in a box and labeling them with a scarlet letter, like, oh my gosh, you're this, and oh my gosh, you're that, we basically are attaching our opinions as like, this is what they're worth. Yeah. They're no better. But think about it. If you've gone through any loss, job, men, divorce, whatever it is, you wouldn't want someone saying, hold a job, can you? Like, oh, you're not going to be a good provider. I don't want to be with you. Or you've been divorced. You can't sustain a relationship. So I need to worry about commitment with you. Oh, you're not the right person I want to get. No, we don't do that. And we shouldn't do that because, okay, it happens. Lose your job. Okay. In relationship as God defined it, you're going to have strengths and weaknesses. Where one's strong, the other one might be weak. There might be times when you're both strong in an area. Great. Even better. There might be times when you're both weak in the area. Okay. Each other's support and just get through it. Yeah. When we start picking apart, and it seems like so many things have changed nowadays. Before it was, how tall are they? What's in their bank account? What kind of car do they drive? And this is what you have to work with. And it's like, no, actually, we now need social skills and self-awareness. And are they emotionally intelligent? And those are important, yes. But it's almost like we're setting a standard of we want this completely whole person that's never dealt with any type of anything. You're not going to get that. It can happen. And I've known so many couples, especially in couples coaching, where they are fine. Something happens years later and they're like, whoa, what just happened? Where did this come from? Like, you have this trauma? Oh my gosh. And to hear people say, this happened, I don't know if you're like, you're not the type of person that would be the best person to be in a relationship with because, like, you've been sexually assaulted and, well, you know, guys need sex, so how is that going to translate? And it's like, you can work through it. Like, everybody has their own hangups. I can't tell you how many guys that I've been coaching where they basically say, I can't show up intimately. I can have sex, but I can't deal with the emotions. It's like, okay, well, if you're wanting her to have the experience that she deserves, the experience she needs to make your experience great, you need to show up and be vulnerable emotionally and intimately. Like, it takes all of it. Like, one can't be missing. They all need to be there. So if we start pinpointing like, oh, you don't have this and you don't have that, I'm sorry, nobody's going to be able to get married. It's not going to work. No one's going to fit the criteria. And we wonder why divorces are so high. It's because of these things. And rather than work on it, it's like, all right, that's another thing. Like, okay, it's to the whole long list. I can't do this. I can't do this. It's not that you can't, but you won't. Yeah. There's a difference. for the guys, stop judging women and how other men have treated them. And especially in society where we're like, this happened again? Oh, so you're the problem. No, not the problem. What it shows you is there's a lot of men that abuse. That's the problem. Stop blaming the women for it. We're going to be more vulnerable. Like, when it happens once, you are a hell of a lot more vulnerable to it happening again. Not the woman's fault at all. She's working through and trying to get through it and trying to overcome it. She isn't so vulnerable. And it doesn't help when people attack her or mistreat her because she is vulnerable. Like, men who are men of God, claiming to be men of God, truly be brothers in Christ. Show these women what that looks like, so that they're like, that's the standard.
Yeah.
I went, we're not expecting perfection. At least set a godly standard the best that you can.
Yeah.
Don't be talking about women in a sexually objectifying way and then being like, you're truly a godly woman, you'll be dressed modestly and you won't do this and you won't post these pictures online. When you're having locker room talk about women and their assets. It's two, like, it's two different lives. Which one is it? I've heard guys where they're influencers, they used to deal with porn, and yet then when they're talking, they'll use words that aren't appropriate. It's like, how have you changed? Because those same words are what women are called in those videos. Those are the same words that are yelled at women as they walk down the street. Those are the same words that are used to describe women in locker room. How are you any different? It sounds like you're still engaging in whatever that lifestyle was that you say you don't do. Like, think of how you use words. Think of what you watch. I'm sorry, I don't want to be watching women being violently raped on TV shows. I don't even know why we even need to even show that. I don't want to be hearing lyrics about that. I don't want to be hearing lyrics about women and just promoting them to just assets. I'm sorry, we're not that. And we were not put on this earth just to supply men with whatever they need. We're human beings. And I keep seeing this video. It's tons of different people making it. I love it. It's I'll say, like, the guy's the provider. He gives the woman the food, but she makes the meal. Yeah. The guy's the head of the house, but she's the heart of the home. The guy, it'll even go into the guy gives the sperm. She gives him a baby. We multiply. Yeah. We multiply. We do things you can't do. And I've also seen this video of this emergency doctor where he's like, and things that we have the most in the emergency room, and he said men who are dealing with the flu and acting like they are having the same pain level of someone who's giving birth. And I'm like, it's like so funny, because I think oftentimes men don't really truly realize, I don't think us women truly realize what men go through, but do men truly realize all the things that women go through? We are constantly objectified, constantly harassed, made to feel uncomfortable, made to feel like it's not safe to go down the street. It might not even be safe to be down a hallway at work because we don't know who we might encounter. We go through so much hormonal stuff, monthly cycles, whatever. Then pregnancy, add that on top, that peaks and ends people's lives. I mean, people have died from this. And yet we're expected to do it all without complaint. Still be there to take care of and cater you, when oftentimes we don't have time to take care of and cater of ourselves. You're not doing that either. Yeah. So keep that in mind. And when you do, This is like this magical thing. Or then, like, how can we be there for you? What way can we help you? Like, let's do dishes. Let's make a meal. Don't come home and be like, I worked so hard and what have you done? And like, it should be so easy for you. Like, you do it. Like, us. And we can help you. It is that simple. Like, when we are treated with respect and treated like we are an equal, that we matter, you're like, what can we do for you? Like, what do you need? Can we help you? And we can be that safe place for you. I think everything I've gone through, and other women that have gone through what I've gone through, you don't expect a guy to understand what we've been through. We also can't have a guy dismiss what we've been through and invalidate. It's not that we want them to take on everything we've been through. It's heavy stuff and it's hard stuff. We just need a soft place to land, a soft place to rest. We need someone just to hold us and let us know we're safe. No different than a guy needing a soft place where he can truly show up naked. And I'm not meaning physically naked, but bearing his soul for every flaw, for everything that he wouldn't even want anybody to know. It is such a safe place. We won't look at you differently. You can cry, you can be vulnerable, you can be emotional, and we won't see you as weak. We'll just see you as human. But we can't have that place for you if you don't first create a safe place for us. Feel safe enough to have that for you. Yeah. Want heaven, you want her to create a heaven for you, first have to create it for her. Women can open up and really truly show up when they feel 100% safe. Not many women feel that way. Not a lot of men, because it's like, oh, okay, now it's feelings, this is strong, this is hard, I can't do this, and then we can't do it. And then you wonder why it's like, we can do this on our own. We don't need you. We've been forced to feel that way. We've been forced to not count on you. We've been forced to, like, we have to do it on our own. Guess what? I didn't have guys helping me with my court case. I had to do it on my own. And the guys that knew about my court case, how many of them offered to pray for me? Didn't. It was, this is a lot. Yes, I know it's a lot. We're just hearing it. I lived and survived it. Don't tell me it's a lot. I get it. You're not even scratching the surface of how hard it's been on me. It's not my job to be the strong person in a relationship. It's not my role. Yet that's exactly the role, and me and so many other women have been forced to be in because men aren't showing up in that role. And so I want to encourage you men, like, change that. And you'll see such a different side to us because we'll be able to be softer and we won't have to be so hard. Like, we have to do it all on our own because that's what we've had to do, is do it all on our own, and we don't want to. It'd be so nice to have someone do that stuff, to be like, okay, how can I help? Even if it was just organizing the papers I had on the floor for a motion, that would have been so helpful. So helpful.
Someone should have been
make you something to eat. Yeah, like, it would have been great, but I've to do it on my own. And of course, my ex-fiance, it was very much like, you need to make this go away. If you have to sign a settlement agreement, like, I don't want to have to deal with this. And that wasn't the right response, because the settlement agreement,
he should have been like, okay, where do I fight with you? Like, where do
right,
I put on my armor? Let's do this. Let's get this bastard.
Right.
Like, oh, sorry for the language, but yeah, no.
But exactly. Yeah, to me, it made me feel like I didn't have not just a supporter, I didn't have a protector.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be in a relationship where I would have to be that protector because it's not my role. It's not my role. I don't want to be that person. Here's the thing, when a man is vulnerable and they need protected, they need comforted, we will be that person. We're just not meant to be that person all the time. You can show up being feminine and being that strong person, masculine, when needed. But masculinity is not the role I'm supposed to be fully embracing 100% of the time. Heck, if you're on the floor crying, I will hold you. I will be that person that you need in the time that you need it. Like, that's, we both kind of fill those roles different times. Like, father, when they see their child crying, oh, what's going on? You're not gonna be like, suck it up. You're gonna be like comforting. You're gonna be nurturing.
Yeah.
That's being in the feminine. That's what they need. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be both. I think we've lived in a society too long where we're like, guys shouldn't be making cookies. Oh my gosh, you're weak. Shouldn't do this. Don't cry. What's wrong with you? No, we can't do that. It's hurting our society. And then guys meet girls who, of course, were emotional. Also, one of the reasons why you love us. And we're emotional, and then it's like, oh my gosh, this is such emotion, I can't deal with it. Like, turn it off. You're too emotional. And it's not that we're too emotional. We're just more emotional than you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Sound of Sosa. I hope you'll join us next week as we continue this series with Witlee Ethan to discuss the life events that put her on a trajectory to helping others, to strengthening her faith, and to making her a stronger woman. I hope you can join us so you can get to know her a little bit better outside of just that story, and just embrace her story to learn and grow, and maybe even be motivated to make a change yourself. So thank you, folks. Take care, and I hope to see you back next week.